All right, welcome back to Discount TAC View. We're just doing some kind of impromptu missile testing, and this is going to be a little bit different than what you guys have probably seen in the past, which is usually the SU-57 modification with basically shooting at a stationary target, flying straight at it. And the reason we're doing this is we want to kind of get a better perspective on how these missiles perform against a maneuvering target and kind of look at kind of what is going on. Why is the R-77 effectively so much worse than the Aim-120? Because I think this is a pretty common experience with everyone. If you've been playing top tier recently, you kind of realize if you don't have an Aim-120, you don't really contest anything like in a BVR perspective. Like there really isn't a point from shooting your missiles at longer ranges because like it just feels like they're never gonna hit. And what we're doing here is we have Lame Ducky on the enemy team. This is a custom mission. This is Afghanistan, and we're all climbing to kind of the same altitude, max climbing, like we're setting up for a BVR engagement. And he is not going to fire back at us. He's going to fly basically a defensive pattern. So he's going to fly S curves, descend, pull the missile into thicker air, and then eventually like try to outclimb it. What he's trying to do, he's trying to defeat the missiles, and kind of our criteria for defeating the missile is when it crosses between supersonic into subsonic speed. So Mach 0.99, for all intents and purposes, we can consider the missile kinematically defeated. At that point, you have to kind of take deliberate effort to point your nose into it and just like fly into it. Aside from that, what we're doing is we are both shooting off missiles at kind of the same altitude, as close as we can get it without repeating the test like 64,000 times, and just trying to get some data on this stuff. So he's in the F-16C, I'm in the 29 SMT, doing a countdown 3, 2, 1, fire. It's not going to be perfect because obviously missiles queue up at different times. We hit buttons at different times, latency, all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the missiles, try to keep track of them all, but once we shoot 6 off, it's going to be really confusing. It's going to be kind of painful to watch the process, but really I think this is the only way I can do it to kind of get a general idea. So we got our first R-77 off, and we got our first 120 off. I'm going to follow the 120s primarily. So the 120s should stay in yellow. The R-77 should stay in blue. So we're just going to kind of like play through this. I'm not going to keep track of these like all the way through every one of the trajectories. I'm going to let 3 missiles get out first, let them fly his pattern, kind of talk about it. So what he's going to do is he's going to like go up, and as he goes up, he's going to descend. It pulls the missile into thicker air. He's trying to get it to overlead, so like lead this way and then lead that way and lead that way, and then it'll go up and it'll have to like ascend. And if you get the missiles below you and you then climb above them, you basically can like technically energy trap them. So we get our third off here. So number three. We're not really concerned about these. I want to just catch up with missile number one. So missile number one should be the slowest one. That's how I'm sorting them. They obviously shouldn't like magically missile number two shouldn't magically like already have slowed down more than the first one. So let's go to free camera, and we're just gonna go ahead. That's gonna take a while. And let's see, missile number one for the R-77 should be at Mach 1.87 versus 1.84 for the 120. So on paper, you might think that the R-77 is doing better here because it is faster, it has more terminal velocity. But there is something I think that needs to be looked at, and that is the distance traveled, but also like the distance from the target, because just because one missile traveled more distance doesn't mean that's necessarily closer. Because just looking at this at a glance, it looks like the 120 is closer. So we're going to get the camera to our first missile, the R-77. We'll look at the target and see basically how far away it is. And instead of like doing trigonometry or math or whatever, we'll just look. We'll try to memorize and see what is actually going on. So first missile was fired a little bit higher altitude for me than Messer. So we have a distance traveled of 27 kilometers, and we're 26.3 from the F-15A. The 120 has only traveled 27.5, so it's only traveled 0.5 kilometers. So in theory, you'd think it's going to be only 0.5 kilometers closer. So let's see if that actually pans out. So 26.3 versus down here and we'll get there. I have to like keep saying 26.3 because otherwise I'm just gonna forget it. But one of the things that could be going on here is the 120 isn't just kinematically better. It also might be just taking like a shorter path. So we said 26.3 for distance. We're 23.8 away from the F-15. So a 0.5 kilometer difference is kind of like a 2 kilometer distance difference right here. So said 26.3 versus 23.8. So it looks like a 2 kilometer difference. I'm doing beer math in my head. These missiles are not going to hit, by the way. These are usually these first missiles are kind of feelers, just to give the guy something to think about. If he kept flying perfectly straight, like yes, they would hit, but in this case, they're not going to. So let's look at those two. And have any of these been defeated yet? And right now, they're both at Mach 1.8. So we can just kind of look here and we'll just let it go. So let's look at how close our first missiles get before they're like officially defeated, because I think that's going to be kind of the X factor here. So we've got our R-77 is streaming in at Mach 1.34. It looks like it's starting to close the distance. And right here, they're both defeated, or more or less. The R-77 is defeated. We've crossed our Mach 0.99 threshold. And maybe if he went like straight down and like somehow like fell into it. So we got we're defeated at 14.3 kilometers versus, let's see, 14.3. 14.3 versus 11.5. So 14.3 versus 11.5, about 11.5, 12.5, 13.5, 14.5. So about like 3 kilometers difference. They're both defeated. If we really, really want to split the difference, okay, cool, we got here. So I would say, yeah, it's 3 kilometers closer for the Aim-120. And at this point, you can see like the motor's out and he's going back up again. And if this was an actual BVR duel, like this would be a good point for him to like counter launch, because you want to like throw your missiles up in the sky to loft them and do all that good stuff. But this missile isn't going to catch up to him, and he's going basically 200 kilometers per hour faster, and he's doing it while going up. So these missiles are defeated. Let's try to go back and catch up to our second missiles and try to figure out what those are. We have a bunch of crap in the air. And so we have our first R-77, and we have our second R-77. Our second R-77 is also already defeated. We have a Mach 0.99 and a Mach 0.94. So this has to be the second one. So let's figure out what our second fastest 120 is. And our second fastest 120 is at Mach 1.38. So our second launch looks like it's just a lot more viable. So 0.99, 16 kilometers away. That's not gonna touch. Let's just follow in our second one. I'm gonna ignore the rest of them for now, because it's gonna turn around and be like, we're gonna get so damn confused of like what the hell is going on. But Mach 1.38, and oh, okay, it just switches us back here. That's a kind of a rip, so we're gonna have to do the same thing. Free camera, because the cursor crossed over here, so it crosses over there. We don't have the video going, and it has turned us around. So let's go here, here, and zoom in. We'll just do a little flyby of what's going on here. So we've got a 3.72 120, a 3.45 R-77. So I probably launched that one first, or it might just be a little bit quicker off the rails. But our next R-77 is 1.83 versus 0.94, 1.87, or not 1.87, 0.8, so I think we're back. We've made it back to our first two missiles are defeated. Our second and our third 120s, though, are still not defeated. So let's go up, get up to our second one again. And our second one is defeated now. And this one has gotten to get closer. I'm sorry, this is really kind of tedious, but you know, it's necessary. It's a necessary evil. So this one is within 9 kilometers. And the one that was back here was already defeated. We can go back and look at what the actual distance is. But this one will be defeated soon. So let's go to the next viable one. So it should be our next viable R-77 is going to be our Mach 1.1 or 1.41 here. So we got to, I'm assuming the two missiles we're looking at are ones that have been fired at the same time. So we have a Mach 1.41, distance traveled 21.2 versus 23.2. So I think these are like kind of like good missiles to kind of compare with each other. So let's look at these two. Let's try to get behind them so we can like keep track of both in the screen at the same time. So 1.2, 1.6, and this one here, the one that we're looking at, is defeated and is locked onto chaff. So the same chaff aspect has not defeated the 120. The 120 is still pointed at the target. This one is pointed off into like space, but it's also defeated. This is not going to hit. This missile down here is really close. So let's kind of get back up to here. Let's get our distance just to get another apples to apples comparison. So this missile is defeated 11 kilometers out. And this one is still viable. So we got 11 kilometers, 9 kilometers, we're 2 kilometers closer. So 7.5. So 7.5 versus 11 is, we call it 8, 9, 10, 11. So this one's 3 kilometers closer, or 3.5. I'm bad at math. And it's going Mach 1.4. So let's kind of follow this one in. Let's wait until it goes to not viable, or see if it actually like loses lock. And here we're finally right there. So we said 11 kilometers to be defeated. This one is 4 kilometers. 4.1. We'll call it 4. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, you know, 7 kilometers closer for this missile to be defeated. So let's go find the next viable R-77. I got a Mach 2. We got a Mach 2 and a Mach 3. So let's go to the Mach 2. And I think these are the horse race missiles here. We got a 120 and a 77. So we'll do the same thing. And see what's going on here. So I think, let's get both of them in the thing. So we said 2.13, 2.08. They're both tracking the same target. We'll just kind of let them go. Follow this one until it's not viable anymore. And I think the 120 is actually going to hit, or it's one of the ones that proxies. So let's see if we can get to his plane, because I think, so yeah, I think the one that we're looking at is going to proxy. So I think it proxies there. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that missile is like literally right on top of him. And that one is defeated right there. I think this one, the .94, is the one that we were tracking because there should be another missile behind us that's going to be faster than the R-77. Although I might be wrong on that. So let's find out. So we got a 1.52. And do we have any other R-77s in the air that are like actually fast? And we do have one over here, 1.78. And our 1.78 has decoyed onto chaff. And there's 3 missiles that have decoyed onto chaff. And they have not, like, they haven't readjusted at all. So this one is going into him. None of these are going to hit. Our 1.09 might be the most viable one. Don't have anything else. So these guys down here, they're all on chaff. So that also might be a thing of like the Doppler gate and the blah 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 relative speed, the path that these take might be unintentionally just more like chaff resistant too. So we've got this one here has is going off into space, and this one here is still tracking. So let's see. I think this is the one that actually proxies. So there. So we get one, and this is one that should hit. Like this should explode. See if we can find Ducky. And I mean, we do got an explosion. Because, or that might be, yeah, that's the explosion. So that one does hit. All of these other missiles, though, are just significantly slower. And they're significantly not just slower, they're just taking like a very long, inefficient path to get there as well. And it just seems like they're easier to decoy. So overall, even though by the end of this we're both at 9,000, we're both kind of at the same speed, so 9,600, so 1.46 versus 1.48. Really, the viability of the 120s versus the R-77s, like it is, to me, it's a night and day difference. Hopefully, you guys can see that. I know there's gonna be someone that'll be like, well, actually, blah blah blah, the gate width of the radar or something like that. In practice, taking both of these planes against each other and running kind of like the same battle plan of like go to altitude, shoot your missiles, and do your cranking, your maneuvering and stuff, and trying to defeat the other guy's missiles. It can be done. You can play the battle plan well enough that you can defeat all the missiles, and if you get lucky, you do everything correctly in the absence of everything else, you might get to the dogfight with no missiles. If one guy saves a missile, though, at the last minute, if one guy realizes that he doesn't have to shoot missiles until closer range, basically, I think the F-16C more or less can probably just get to the merge with like 2 more missiles equipped, because like the early ones are not going to hit. Just flying like a 60-degree left-right pattern, kind of going down, or just kind of making the smallest amount of maneuvers can basically defeat the R-77 at a much further distance than the 120. It means that effectively, I don't think that these planes are really competitive with each other, at least in this kind of scenario. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed watching me click through missiles, and that's the video.